Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the NAEP 2018 Technology and Engineering Literacy Report. We are so excited to be able to have three great experts who will be presenting some interesting findings to you all and discussing this great topic. We encourage you to ask any questions throughout the presentation via Zoom's question and answer tool. If you haven't used Zoom before, you can move your mouse cursor down to the bottom of your screen and hover for a moment. A toolbar will appear and you can click the Q that underneath it says Q&A, which should bring up a window for you to ask your questions. Feel free to ask questions at any point throughout the presentation, but we will be answering any and all questions at the end of the presentation once all presenters have concluded. Thank you all so much for attending, and with that, we're going to kick off our webinar for today.
Hi, I'm Carol Lamb, Director of the School of Technology at Youngstown State University. Thank you for joining this webinar today. This afternoon, we'll learn more about what young people across the nation know and understand when it comes to technology and engineering literacy. This is important as we work to prepare more students for careers in engineering technology, a path for students that focuses on practical rather than theoretical engineering methods. The information in this presentation can help those of us preparing these students for careers in engineering technology by providing insight into what the students who will soon be in our classrooms understand and what trends we're seeing over time.
I'm Laura LoGerfo, the Assistant Director of Reporting and Analysis at the National Assessment Governing Board. The Governing Board sets policy for the National Assessment of Educational Progress, also known as the Nation's Report Card, also known as NAEP. NAEP started decades ago and is the only ongoing nationally representative assessment of education in the nation. NAEP serves an important role in providing objective, independent data on the condition and progress of education in the United States. NAEP informs the nation about what students in grades 4, 8, and 12 know and can do in a variety of academic subjects, and tells us about learning conditions and other factors related to student performance. Now, there are no NAEP results for individual students or schools, just for the nation, states, and for some subjects, 27 large urban districts. And NAEP is not used for accountability purposes. NAEP assesses students in foundational subjects, such as reading, social studies, mathematics, and science. You've heard of STEM. Knowledge and skills in science, technology, engineering, and math are critical for students to acquire so they can become citizens who can compete globally and engage meaningfully and productively in society. What NAEP was missing was the T and the E. That's why the National Assessment Governing Board and the National Center for Education Statistics work together to build an assessment that measures students' technology and engineering literacy skills. The NAEP Technology and Engineering Literacy Assessment, or TEL. The first TEL was administered in 2014 and released in 2015. 4 years later, we just released the results from the second administration of TEL. Before we get to the results, what does TEL actually mean? So we define technology as any modification of the natural world done to fulfill human needs or desires. So that can be anything from a pencil to a supercomputer to the smartest smartphone and everything in between. Engineering is a systematic and often iterative approach to designing objects, processes, and systems for human purposes. And literacy refers to competencies needed for all citizens, not just for students who want to become master engineers, but for all students. So what do these three parts mean together? Students who are literate in technology and engineering can use, understand, and evaluate technology. They can understand the technological principles and strategies that are needed to develop solutions and achieve goals. This includes being able to use various technologies to communicate and collaborate. The computer-based TEL assessment asks 8th graders to complete collaborative multimedia tasks and to solve practical problems based in real-world context. It focuses on 3 major areas. First, technology and society, students' understanding of the effects of technology on society and the natural world and related ethical questions. Second, design and systems, students' understanding of engineering design processes, including basic aspects of managing and troubleshooting everyday technology. And third, but not least, information and communication technology, students' ability to use technologies for accessing, creating, and communicating information. Now, across all 3 content areas, students are asked to demonstrate a wide range of knowledge and skills by applying each of the following practices. We have understanding technological principles, which focuses on students' capability to think and reason with that knowledge of technology. Developing solutions and achieving goals, which refers to students' systematic application of technological knowledge, tools, and skills to address problems in societal, design, curriculum, and realistic context. And communicating and collaborating, which centers on students' capabilities to use contemporary technologies to communicate for a variety of purposes and in a variety of ways, working individually or in teams. So that's how we define and measure TEL. I'm going to turn it over to Grady Wilburn with the National Center for Education Statistics, who will walk us through the NAEP 2018 TEL results.
Thank you, Laura, and hi, everyone. My name is Grady Wilburn, and I am a statistician in the Assessment Division at the National Center for Education Statistics, or NCES. NCES is located within the U.S. Department of Education and the Institute of Education Sciences, and it fulfills a congressional mandate to collect, collate, analyze, and report complete statistics on the condition of American education, as well as conduct and publish reports and review and report on education activities both here in the United States and internationally. I am happy today to share some highlights from our more recent assessment, the 2018 TEL results. So why don't we go ahead and start with an overview of the assessment to complement what Laura just took us through. So like all NAEP assessments, we collect our data between January and March of the year. And so these TEL 2018 results reflect data collected in January through March 2018. We have a national sample of about 15,000 8th graders in 600 schools from across the nation. And the results are available for both the nation and selected student groups. And I'll go through those student groups in a moment here. And then finally, the results are reported for 2018, which is the current year, and then the previous year, 2014, which is also the first year TEL was administered. And so we have 2 data points we'll discuss. Average scores will go range between a score of 0 to 300 for TEL overall, but I'll also will report results on those content areas and practices that Laura just mentioned, as well as look at results by the NAEP achievement levels. Moving on to our assessment design, TEL is administered via laptops, and it is just grade 8. I'm not sure if I mentioned that this is just 8th graders. It includes the multimedia scenario-based tasks, or the SBTs, as well as some interactive standalone questions. And like all NAEP assessments, after the assessment is over, students complete a 15-minute questionnaire which asks about their experiences and opportunities around technology and engineering. Also, the schools complete a similar question asking about opportunities around technology and engineering. And I'll highlight a couple of those results towards the end of this presentation. So the overall takeaway from the 2018 TEL results were that students scored higher in 2018 compared to the previous assessment, which was in 2004. So if you're looking at the slide, what you'll see before I talk about the results, I wanted to orient you first to this slide. And you'll see that the scales score on the left for 0 to 300 there on the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, you see 14 and 18 representing the 2 assessment years. You see the achievement levels off to the right, NAEP Advanced, NAEP Proficient, NAEP Basic. And then you see the performance of both 2014 and 2018 in the middle of the graph. And if you see an asterisk, like you see next to 150, that means that that score is statistically different from the current year that we're discussing, which is 2018. And so you see that students improved by 2 points when you compare 2014 to 2018. Moving on to the TEL content areas, as you heard earlier, there are three: the technology and society, designs and systems, and information and communication technology. And you can see that off to the left side of your screen. And what you'll notice if you look to the far right, the column labeled score point increase shows that each of these content areas showed a statistically significant increase when you compare the performance in 2018 to 2014, with tech and society going up 2 points, and designs and systems and information and communication technology, students improving performance by about 3 points. Moving on to the TEL practices, you see the practices off to your left. And again, if you look to the far right column, you see that performance improved across all three practices: 2 points for the understanding technological principles, as well as the developing solutions and achieving goals practice, and 3 points for the communicating and collaborating practice. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to highlight several of the student groups in which we can report performance for in 2018. We're going to start looking at our different race ethnicity categories. And so off to the left, you'll see the race ethnicity, and you'll see the labels for race ethnicity. The 2014 score column is followed by the 2018 score column. And here, a significant improvement is indicated by the number being in a dark blue circle. If the change from 2014 to 2018 was not statistically significant, you'll see it indicated in a gray diamond. And so here you see that both that white, Black, and Asian students showed a significant improvement in TEL overall from 2014 to 2018, with the other student groups showing a non-significant change. When we look at gender, which we're going to go into a little more detail towards the end of this presentation, you see that males had a non-significant 1 point change from 2014, while females had a 3 point improvement. And I do want to say the math isn't wrong here. When I create the table with the score change, we use the unrounded numbers. And so what you're seeing on your screen are the rounded numbers. So it looks like it's 4 points, but in fact it is, it does round to 3 points. So that's not a typo. All right, moving on to students with disabilities. We are able to report on students with disabilities. These are students who have an IEP plan. What you see is that students who are identified as an SD, as a student with a disability, had no significant change, and those that didn't identify as a student with disability had a 3 point change. Going down to our English language learners, you see that those identified as an English language learner had no significant change, while those not identified as an English language learner did show a significant improvement. The next two indicators we're going to look at is our indicators of socioeconomic status. First, the eligibility for the National School Lunch Program. We see that those students who are eligible for the National School Lunch Program showed an improvement compared to 2014 of 3 points. And then you look at the our other indicator of socioeconomic status, which is highest level of parental education. This question is asked of our 8th graders and our 12th graders, but not our 4th graders. You see that students who indicated that the highest level of parental ed was the parent didn't finish high school showed a 6 point improvement. And the only other significant change was those students who indicated the parents graduated from college, or that one of their parents graduated from college. They showed about a 3 point improvement. Moving on to a couple of more subgroups, we look at school location. And so you can see here, looking at the gray diamonds, that none of the school locations had a significant improvement. But I do think it's important to point out that in 2018, students who are located in schools in the suburbs performed higher on TEL than those students located in cities, towns, or rural school locations. And then similarly, looking at region of the country, we see no significant improvement from 2014. But again, I'll point out that students in the Midwest performed higher than students in the Northeast, the South, and the West, and students in the Northeast performed higher than both those in the South and the West. So to get a better look at how improvement is going or how students are performing across the performance distribution, we want to look beyond the overall average score. And so what we do is we break the trend line into percentiles. And what we'll see in a moment here is that students at the middle and the high, what we're looking at now is that students in the middle and the higher performing students made gains compared to 2018. And so let me again orient you to this slide. Again, we have 5 percentiles, the 10th and the 25th percentile I'll refer to as our lower performing students, and the students at the 75th and the 90th percentile at the top I'll refer to as our higher performing students, while students at the 50th percentile I'll refer to as our middle performing students. And what you see is that those middle and higher performing students, as indicated by the asterisk, showed improvement when looking at performance in 2018 compared to 2014, whereas our lower performing students showed no significant change. And this is a theme when you start looking at our content areas and our practices. Here you see content areas with the different rows representing the different student group at the percentiles. And across all the content areas, you see that students at the 50th, the 75th, and the 90th percentile showed a significant improvement. And not listed here is that the 10th and 25th showed no change. And this is again consistent when you look at practices with those higher and middle performing students showing improvement, with those lower performing students showing no significant change. And you could see how this performance kind of shook out when you look at the NAEP achievement levels. And so again, if we start with NAEP Basic, you'll see that in 2014, on the left, 83% of students were at or above NAEP Basic. In 2018, it was 84%. That difference is not significant, as indicated in the very far left with the arrows pointing kind of side to side. When you look at or above NAEP Proficient, you see that in 2014, 43% of students were at or above NAEP Proficient. And in 2018, that changed to 46%, a 3 percentage point improvement. And then finally, looking at NAEP Advanced, you see that in 2018, about 5% of students were scored at the NAEP Advanced mark. And this is an improvement over the 3% in 2014. So the theme of the TEL release of both 2018 and 2014 was looking at how female students performed, period, but actually how they performed compared to their male counterparts. And so we wanted to dive into that a little bit deeper and look at their performance across the content areas and the practices. So let's start with the content areas. And so again, we have 3 content areas. Those are listed off to your left. And then we have the 2014 performance on the left side, looking at the female-male comparison. And then on the right, you have the 2018 female-male comparisons across these content areas and TEL overall. So let me start with 2014. As you see at the top line, females scored 3 points higher than their male counterparts. And then if you go down, you'll see that females were no different from males in the first 2 content areas, tech and society and design and systems, but were 6 points better than their male colleagues when you look at the information and communication technology. That's 2014. When you look at 2018, you see that females are now scoring 5 points better than males, and they're also now outperforming males in the tech and society content area and continue to outperform males in the information and communication technology content area, but there's no difference between females and males in the designs and systems content area. Moving over to our TEL practices, you'll see a very similar theme. In 2014, you see that females outperform males in 2 of the 3 TEL practices. And in 2018, you see that females outperform males in all 3 of the TEL practices. And so overall, females outperform males in all 3 TEL practices and in 2 of the 3 TEL content areas. And so as I mentioned at the beginning, we ask our students to complete a student questionnaire to better understand the opportunities around learning and understanding technology and engineering literacy. And so the first question that we're going to look at is course taking. And so what we see in 2018 is that 57% of students reported taking at least one class related to technology or engineering in 2018. And that is an improvement, or an increase, I'll say, from the 52% of students that reported taking a class in 2014. And you can imagine how this may relate to performance on the TEL assessment. And it's positively correlated, meaning that those students who reported taking at least one or more TEL-related class, that 57%, scored higher, 156, than those students who reported not taking a TEL-related class, which was 43%, and they scored on average 148. And looking to see across classes where we see some changes, on the left side, you see the different categories or buckets of classes, if you will. The gold line indicates the percent who reported taking that class in 2018, and the blue line is the percent that reported taking that class in 2014, or that type of class, I should say. And what you see is that industrial technology, 12% in both 18 and 14, but when you look at engineering, and you look at any class to learn, program, or build computers, and you look at any other technology-related class, that asterisk indicates the percentage in 2018 is higher than that percentage reported in 2014. And you can see how that would shake out with the very bottom category of those students who did not take any of the classes listed above, being lower in 2018, 43% versus the 48% in 2014. So I just got through telling you how females scored higher than males, and how those that take a TEL-related course score higher than those that don't. And so this is a unique finding in that more males actually reported taking a technology or engineering-related class, 61% in 2018, versus females, who about 53% of which reported taking a technology and engineering-related class. And when we look at this across those same buckets of classes that we just mentioned this a moment ago, you'll see that the same buckets on the left side, and the red or burnt orange color represents females, while the blue color represents males. And you'll see in all cases, except for the bottom category, or the bottom two categories, that more males, a higher percentage of males reported taking these classes versus female students, with the largest numeric percentage being that 9% in engineering. 30% of males reported taking an engineering course versus 21% of female 8th graders. And at the very bottom, you see that 47% of females reported not taking any of those classes versus the 39% of males. So just to summarize our findings here, we summarize the findings by gender. What you see is that with the exception of NAEP, the boys at the NAEP Advanced, meaning the highest performing boys, they saw no improvement overall across any of the content areas, practices, but they're more likely to report taking at least one TEL-related course, which, as you saw, was correlated with higher performance. And then also you saw that they're falling behind girls across more of those areas, with the practices and content areas, the females outperforming males in 5 of the 6 content areas and practices. And the bottom bullet shows that when you look at the content areas and the practices where females just really seem to be outperforming boys, they're linked with communication and collaboration. And so this suggests that the male 8th graders could improve performance by working on having stronger communication and collaboration knowledge. Turning our attention to the 8th grade girls, as I mentioned, you saw that girls made improvement across every single TEL content area and practice, as well as overall, and outperformed boys in all but one area of TEL, which was that designs and systems content area. And this is regardless of course taking, they outperform boys. And what I mean by that is that if you separate the population into those that took a TEL-related class, and those that didn't take a TEL-related class, girls that took a TEL-related class performed higher than boys that took a TEL-related class, and girls that did not take a TEL-related class performed higher than boys that did not take a TEL-related class. And so even though girls seem to be outperforming boys, it seems like, again, looking at the data, it suggests that if they were to take more classes, so you remember the percent was 61 to 52, that if if that percent were to improve, it suggests that girls would be performing even higher or even improved performance on TEL. And so again, that was just a real short excerpt of the assessment. If you want to see some of the scenario-based tasks that the students actually completed, you can go to the website you see on your screen, nationsreportcard.gov/TEL, and you can actually take the assessment the same way the students did, I should say. We released 5 of these tasks, and so you can go to the website, you will see exactly the same thing, exactly the same scenarios that the students were presented. And I think it better helps you understand how the governing board and NCS decided to operationalize the governing board framework of technology and engineering literacy. It really helps you contextualize what that looked like.
All right, so we are now going to open it up to the question and answer section. So as a reminder, if you have a question for any one of the speakers, you can go to the bottom of your screen. If you hover, you'll see a box that says Q on it, and you can use that to type in your question. And so our first question is for either Grady or Laura. We've talked about these scenario-based tasks. Can you give an example or explain what the scenario-based task looks like on the assessment?
Laura, I can take that. So if you go to the website, there are 5 release scenario-based tasks, and we have a task called Andromeda, a task called Chicago, one about a recreation center, one about an iguana. And so one of the more interesting tasks, at least personally, is the iguana task. And with the iguana task, students are asked to help troubleshoot and fix the habitat for a classroom iguana named Iggy. And so what the scenario task takes them through is helps them learn about iguanas. So we give them the knowledge that they need. So they learn about iguanas and their basic needs. And then they have to work through the task to determine how best to fix Iggy's wire mesh cage, because the scenario shows a kind of an animated video of the iguana not behaving correctly. And the narrative over the video is saying, something's not right. And so you just learn the ideal habitat for an iguana. So given how this iguana is behaving, what should you do to fix this Iggy's wire mesh cage so that it is now the ideal environment for the iguana? And so there's a heat lamp in there. And so you can kind of mess with the heat lamp to see if that helps the iguana. And you can do different things to help get the iguana to behave correctly. Another task is the Chicago task, and where students are asked to develop an online exhibit about Chicago's water pollution problem in the 1800s. And so they are presented with videos about this expansive population increase in Chicago that took place in the 1800s and how this resulted in them not having clean water. And so you have to figure out by quote unquote interviewing and reading diaries of people that lived back then to see what the problem is, and then kind of brainstorm solutions on how to do that and put together a presentation that shows the best way of fixing these problems. I'm probably not doing it justice with just me talking about it. I really encourage you all to go to the website and just take the task and see exactly what we're talking about.
Great, thank you. All right, another question for Grady. Are the TEL results consistent with results for other national science and mathematics assessments in terms of sex, course taking, socioeconomic status, and race?
That's a great question. As far as performance goes across races, I think what you're getting at is as far as if I use a term I probably shouldn't, if you rank the races in order of how they performed on TEL, is that similar to across other assessments? And yes, that it is very similar. One other kind of anomaly is that rural students on TEL perform better relatively to some of the other some of the other assessments, meaning that rural students typically are towards the bottom if you look at performance on math and reading. But in TEL, they're kind of in the middle. If you look at the, I think it's city, suburb, urban, and rural, they're kind of in the middle of the pack there, which we kind of devised to be like maybe rural students are participating in more TEL-like activities outside of the class. And you look at the student questionnaire, it kind of shakes out that way. There was an international assessment, and I think it's ISILS, but I can't remember what that acronym stands for, that was just administered. I guess it was probably just administered last year. And I don't have that I don't have the information on that right now. But at the end of the presentation, you'll see my email address. And if you would like more information on that, I'm happy to share it with you.
Great. And then another question for Grady. Is there a similar assessment conducted for children in high school?
So I'm actually going to turn that over to Laura. Because there isn't a similar one, but I do know there are plans to, well, let me say this. Go ahead, Laura, interrupt me.
Yeah, no, that's right. So there are, so the governing board, when they started the assessment framework for TEL, it crosses the grades 4, grades 8, and grades 12. We just recently released an assessment schedule, and in the distant future, we hope to assess TEL in grade 12, but it's in like the distant future. Various reasons, a lot related to budget issues, go into how we assess and what we assess and when we assess. So the framework exists, but the test does not yet. Does that make sense?
Great. And then another question, this one for Grady. Do you intend to follow the 8th grade cohort of students assessed through 12th grade?
So this is similar to what we don't, so NAEP isn't the type of study that follows students. We take a national sample, the year we assess the data. And some of the same students, if we were to do this in 4 years, but it isn't on the plan, some of the same students may be in the sample as before, but we don't do that type of cohort analysis that sees how students performed in 8th grade, I should say, and how they would have performed 4 years later.
Okay, and then it looks like we have one more question here. Considering the overall increase in support for STEM-oriented programs, it seems somewhat surprising that the assessment changes from 2018 over 2014 are minimal. Is there any way to connect that to funding and support for engineering and technology-related coursework?
I can take a stab at that. There probably is some way to connect them. We haven't done that analysis here to see if results, change or not based off the funding given locally or state level or nationally. There is, like we mentioned, there is a connection through students that take a technology and engineering class and how they perform on TEL. And what wasn't shown here was that there is also a connection between students who engage in TEL-like activities outside of class and how they perform on TEL. And so these are programs, or these are recreational hobbies that students are doing, outside of class, and not showing a relationship with how they perform at TEL. So I cannot answer the question as far as if this is related to funding, but I can say that students that participate in these types of tasks did seem to perform better on TEL. So anything that could increase the opportunity for students to have those types of chances to engage in TEL, I think should be encouraged.
All right, so that concludes the question and answer section. If you have a question for one of the presenters, or if you'd like to connect with them, you can reach them over email at the following email addresses. And then the National Assessment Governing Board and the National Center for Education Statistics also have Twitter and Facebook pages, as well as LinkedIn pages, where they'll show more of the results from the TEL assessment and other assessments and shine more light on what US students know and can do around technology and engineering. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.